These are the men and women of Beaver Valley, the bravest of the brave. They fought fearlessly for their country, their city, their community, and for the ideals we share as Americans. They served proudly in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Here now are their stories, their own experiences in their own words, the words of the heroes of Beaver Valley. In 1868, Decoration Day was established to commemorate those who had died in the Civil War. As the nation's history unfolded, it became Memorial Day to honor those who have died in all our wars. This year, we salute 3 area veterans for their service and thank them for sharing their extraordinary stories with us. Drafted in 1942, Elwood City native Valentino Rocco entered World War II with the Army's 12th Armored Division. After arriving in Liverpool, England, Rocco's division crossed the English Channel to the coast of France, only to face a torrential downpour.
All we had to cover us was the canvas bags that we had over our backs. But then we managed to get dry somehow. And then about 2 days after that, we prepared to cross the border from France to Germany. And that's when we began to see the horrors of the war.
The 12th Armored Division followed General George Patton's army across Germany. Rocco's responsibility was to assist medics. He also played in the division band.
Why, we would go along with them in case they needed help, because they were short-manned. And when we had the off hours, so to speak, then we'd rehearse the band.
One night, while on guard duty, Rocco noticed an artillery shell that sounded different than normal.
And we could hear the shells going over our heads. We called them screaming memes. And as the shells were going over, one of them sounded different. It sounded like it landed closer than the others. And we were very curious. Next morning, 2 or 3 of us went out just to see if that was a close landing or not. Sure enough, about 25 yards away from where we were housed, there was a crevice, a hole big enough for a foundation for a home. It caused that much damage. Had it landed 25 yards or so closer, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Proceeding deeper into Germany, Rocco and fellow soldiers noticed battered and broken American, British, and German tanks. They stopped to look at an isolated German tank in a field. After first checking for booby traps, they looked inside.
And we saw the body of what appeared to be about an 18 or 19-year-old German soldier. He had his hand on the emergency brake, and a shell came through the window of the tank and unfortunately blew his head right off, and it was down beside him.
The men saw a wallet and opened it to see a picture of a family and a person who appeared to be the boy, now deceased, in the tank.
And he looked like a very handsome German boy in uniform, and we figured what a terrible situation.
Rocco recalled that he and his division passed one of Hitler's many concentration camps.
We passed what appeared to be, and I know it was, the ovens that Hitler built to burn the Jewish people in Germany. And we looked out on the landscape near the ovens, and we saw what appeared to be fragments of arms, legs, torsos, heads. It was a very difficult sight to see. And it was too much for us to accept, but we had to accept it.
Despite the horror, Rocco also got to see the beautiful landscape of the German countryside.
And it was absolutely breathtaking. I was very impressed with the country, the beautiful, beautiful country. And Hitler had no right to do what he did. He was a devil, to my estimation, for the people.
Moving through Frankfurt, Rocco saw the damage of American and British bombings, with piles of bricks strewn throughout the streets. Upon first entering Berlin, Rocco had hopes of seeing the Berlin Opera House.
And I recall seeing pictures of it It was a beautiful sight to behold, but when we got there, it was not a beautiful sight. It was a mass of bricks.
Shortly after leaving Berlin, the war ended. The 12th Armored Division stayed in Heidenheim, where they took up housing until they could go back to the United States. While there, the division band played concerts for the locals.
And they were very, very nice to us. It was almost as if they forgot that we were at war with each other.
Rocco returned home from the war and went to Duquesne University, where he met his wife. He worked as a band director and guidance counselor at Beaver Falls High School. And recently, Rocco wrote the 12th Armored Division March.
I wanted to dedicate that to the friends that I had, many friends that I had in the service. Well, I try not to look at the solemn end of it. I try to thank God that a lot of us got to come back alive.
Pete Weisenmiller grew up on Spring Street in Aliquippa. He was working at J&L Steel in the 1950s when he decided that he was going to join the Marine Corps.
And I thought, well, hell, I'm not doing anything here. So I went over to Rochester and I joined the Marine Corps. And I went home and I told my mom, I says, I'm supposed to leave in a short time, a couple of days or less, I guess it was. And I said, I'm going to Paris Island. And she never said a word, you know, which I thought was a little unusual, I thought.
Weisenmiller went to Camp Lejeune for motor transport school and then to Camp Pendleton.
That's where they trained you how to kill. That's what you went there for. You had 16 weeks of high-grade training. They wanted to make sure that where I was going, I had to understand what was coming.
Tasked with the 1st Marine Division, 3rd Battalion, Weisenmiller got on a boat to Japan.
There was two things that amazed me on that ship. The first one was the 40-foot waves. You would be on a ship, and it would go down, and all you saw was water. Then the ship would come up, and all you saw was sky. I mean, up. Then I got over to Japan, and when you first start going to Japan, Mount Fuji was right dead ahead of us. The white cap, you could see it, the tip of it. And the closer you got, the more you saw.
Weisenmiller and thousands of other Marines eventually made their way to Incheon, Korea for an amphibious invasion of the country.
They had a Methodist minister come out on the ship, on the deck. And the guys were getting ready to get on a landing craft in Incheon Harbor to go into Korea. And he said, on the way out, there's two big, great cardboard boxes, one on each the promenade side, starboard, and port side of the ship. So guys started going through there and reaching in the box. And they pull out a pair of rosary beads. I'll be damned, I thought, boy, that's unusual, you know. And they took them. That surprised me. There was no Methodist on that ship, I tell you. So they took their helmets off, most of them, put that rosary bead over their neck. Because some of them guys, within 3 or 4 days, they were dead.
As part of his duties, Weisenmiller's first priority was serving as an infantryman, but he also played a role as a mechanic.
I'm not sure I could tell you where we really were sometimes, because we had the rear area. We always went back there, but we went different places. You know, we went over to 5th Marines sometimes, 7th Marines, and the area we went into was kind of desolate and everything, and they cleaned the battlefield up pretty good, but there was a hell of a lot of blood laying around. I just can't imagine what went on there, you know, in my life. But in the winter, that was the worst. And you used to have to, on the ridges, you'd walk along the path and you'd see the wild animals and stuff, you know. And whenever I'd walk, I, snow was up like here.
Weisenmiller also recalled an impactful scene while passing through Seoul.
We were riding through Seoul, and they had leveled the place. You know, there might have been a few buildings standing, but the place was literally level. And the one place that I caught my eye was they made this little shanty out of beer cans. And then there was like a garbage dump area over there along the highway. And you looked over there, and there's little kids and old people and rats and whatever in this place trying to find stuff to eat, you know. And that kind of impressed me a little bit that, you know, war is hell.
Some 60 years later, Weisenmiller still has strong feelings about his service in the Marines.
Well, the thing it is, when I go in to the VA every year, they always ask you the magic question: do you still have flashbacks? And I tell them, yeah. See, I don't have the answers for war, but I know what war is. Nobody wins. My mom used to say that when I was growing up. Nobody wins, Pete. She was right.
Ambridge native Donald Villella graduated from Geneva College in 1968. He was then drafted for Vietnam. At first, he didn't want to have anything to do with the war, so he sought help from a family friend.
We told my dad what I wanted him to do. My dad said, no, you're going. And the only 2 times in my life I ever saw my dad cry was when I left for Vietnam and when I come home. And when I got the basic training, I had a bad attitude. I really didn't want to be there.
After about 3 weeks, a drill corporal talked to Villella, explaining how much potential Don possessed.
And after that, my attitude changed. Because he told me, he said, you only got to do this for 2 years. Don't ruin your whole life. Just do it for 2 years. So I decided to do the best I can.
After basic training, Villella was sent to a primary leadership course at Fort Knox. He ended up being the distinguished graduate. He stayed at Fort Knox for radio school, where he was taught Morse code.
And I remembered asking the instructor, what if we don't learn how to send 15-word groups a minute? And he says, well, then we're going to strap a radio on your back and send you to Vietnam. So I practiced hard.
Villella learned his 15-word groups per minute and was sent to radio teletype school at Fort Gordon in Georgia. After a few more courses, Villella was sent to Vietnam with the 52nd Artillery Group, headquartered in Pleiku. He was in charge of the night shift communication center.
Never really saw any action because I was in a brigade headquarters at the where I was stationed. I mean, we got rocket attacks at times, and snipers would try to fire, and people would try to come through the wire and stuff like that. And there were times we weren't far from the city of Pleiku. We'd go down into the city. We didn't have any problems at all with the South Vietnamese people that we were around. The one thing that I had to do is in the morning, I used to have to go down if the helicopter landed with bodies, and I used to have to open the body bag and check the dog tag, take the information off the dog tag so that we could put it in the intelligence sit-trup that I type up the next night when I go on duty the next night. But that stayed with me. You'd look in the body bag and you'd see it was a guy that you had a drink with at the NCO club a few days before, you know, and stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, our thing was, our duty was pretty easy, you know, over there, but we do know that and we saw some of the suffering. That was something that it took me years before I was even able to talk about that. I was fortunate. My service in Vietnam, being at a headquarters unit, was, I didn't have to fire a rifle the whole time I was there. We do know that and we saw some of the suffering.
When he returned from the war, Villella had no intention of being involved with the military again, but he ended up joining the National Guard with the 28th Signal Battalion. His explanation as to why he did so captures the very essence of sacrifice and the meaning of Memorial Day.
God leads you down strange paths, and that's, I think that's what happened with me. We have to love and respect the people that gave all for this country, from the Revolutionary War up to today. There's people still being lost today.